Hey guys, what's up? This is misc.inc, and recently I released a bootleg on my YouTube channel from Telepatía. The original was by Uchis, and Claire Young did a beautiful cover for this song, and I decided to remix it, put my own touch onto it. And here's the how-to. So we go into the project, go through every track and how I did certain stuff, what my thought process is, and I hope you guys learned something, so let's just jump right into it. So this is the project, and I just started with the vocal. And the vocal was, like I said, from the cover by Claire Young, and I used RX7 by iZotope to just isolate the vocal from the rest and to just be able to work with the vocal itself. So let's just listen to the vocal.
¿Quién no diría que se podría hacer amor por telepatía?
You can hear some guitar stuff going on, and this is essentially why I used a lot of EQing. So let's just look at the vocal chain for now. I use autotune just to get things like in control, especially when you have some artifacts going on. Might sound a little weird. Then I have some EQing to cut out the lows and dip the low-mid frequencies. Some compression, some distortion, another EQ to get rid of some harshness, Soothe to essentially do the same job like harsh vox start, like this should say everything, and we have some little cool effect EQ like a telephone emulating stuff. So this is just kind of narrowing down everything. This is a preset. I think the preset was already made in FabFilter Pro Q2, like the phone preset. Pretty easy stuff. So how did I started this whole project? The whole cover was made in D major, and the corresponding minor scale is B minor. So I just grabbed an instrument, like this is a really cool synth one shot. Just a kind of fuzzy sine wave, and I just started writing chords. So let's have a listen. I started with the D major chord, then the B, A, B again, Fis, and then G. And what's interesting about this chord progression is that it kind of follows the same structure over the course of 4 bars. So you have one chord over 2 bars, and then another 2 chords on the 3rd and 4th bar. And then the whole rhythmic structure is repeated, but with different chords. And this way, you kind of have a cool mixture between something that is familiar for the listener and something that is new. And I'm always kind of aiming for interesting 8-bar loops, like those haunted 8-bar loops all you guys are producing and never finishing, me included. Anyway, I want to make interesting 8-bar loops first, so this is the chord progression I came up with. By the way, my return channels are always like an 8th dot delay, a 4th delay, a long reverb, and a short reverb. I use a lot of delay and long reverb here, so this is like... Anyway, then I have a piano going on, which is basically playing the same stuff, but in a higher range. So you have the synth chords, which are playing here, like between 144 and like 500, something around this. And then you have the piano, which is playing from 300 to 800. And because they are in a different register, because the piano is essentially played an octave above the synth, you naturally have like mixed the sounds together, because you don't have to worry about both playing in the same register, both fighting for the frequencies, both fighting for the headroom. Instead, you just separate it by the production. And this is something I really like, and often think about when I'm producing, especially when I'm layering, that you kind of have a mind. The best way for me, or the ideal way, would be one instrument plays in one kind of frequency range, and that's it. That's like clean, really simple stuff. You don't want to overcomplicate your music. So this is why I chose the piano to be an octave above. Those two sounds, those chord progression was the start, and together with the vocals already sounded really cool to me.
Que yo te haría si te tuviera de frente, la mente te la volaría. De noche de día, que yo te haría.
What I then did was, and this is like frozen to audio, but I can show you how I did this. This is like a simple sine wave melody. Kind of playful, I like that. And essentially it follows the chord structure. But what I really like about this sound, and all you guys have this sound, is like when you take a new serum, you go to presets, and you should find a folder which is called synth. I kind of just sorted out all presets and found this preset. It is called Velo Harm by, I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, Genji Ziraisi? Ziraisi? I don't know. Sorry, man, if I mispronounced your name. But this preset is just awesome, man. Because it's kind of like a composing weapon, if you want to call it. So essentially, it's kind of a detuned sine wave, which is just a basic sound. But the wavetable is the harmonic series. So if I move up the wavetable, it kind of moves up the octaves. And this is connected to the velocity. So in short, if you take a sound or a note, put the velocity all the way to 1, it's like a low B. If you increase it, it's a higher B. And I don't know why I love this so much, but it makes composing super easy because you take a note, you just change the velocity, and it kind of just jumps up and down. And this is really cool because you don't have to worry about going this way up. All your melody is kind of playing in the same spot in the middle, in your middle on the screen. And I like this, so don't judge me, man. I love it. And this is how I created like this intro melody. It follows the structure, so I always start with root note and then just play around with melody notes just to give it like an ambient feeling, and then just put it through the Character 500. It's like a cool hardware distortion unit I recently got and really love, and kind of adds this grit to it. So have a listen again. It kind of adds something to it. And this is like the basic melodic structure of everything. So and together with the vocal, you already have really good sounding stuff.
Que no diría que se podría hacer amor por telepatía.
What I like to do then is introduce some more melody to it, because chords are nice, vocals are nice, but to have some kind of edge to it, people can remember. And this is like just a basic melody I'm playing here, and it's my favorite synth one shot. You can find this one on Splice. So just copy this name into Splice and you will have it, and thank me later because it's sounding so well. Again, I just send it through the same delay, the same reverb, just to have everything in the same space essentially. But the melody is basically the same. So it's just playing Fis, E, Cis, and then D. But because we are changing the chords underneath them, so this is the first set of chords like D, B, A, and then we have B, Fis, G, and because the same melody is playing, it has a different feeling to it. So if you listen to what the melody feels like in the first part, kind of sad, kind of happy, kind of melancholic, and the second part, gives it a little kind of hopeful structure. So if you want to talk in stories, you go down the rabbit hole. Our hero is coming to the end boss and then going up again. At least this is something I had in my mind. And then the hope comes back. Together with the lead synth, we have this little vox chop here, which is essentially cut out from the vocals here and processed heavily with auto-tune, little alto boy, which pitches it up an octave. Narrow everything down with the EQ, some more EQ because you never have enough EQ, some OTT. For everyone who doesn't know it, Google it. It's really And then some Echo Boy longer delay I haven't had in my return channels. But the interesting part here is not how I processed it, but where I put it, because we have the melody playing in the first part of the full bars. And then comes the answer in the second part. And this way, nothing is fighting with each other. Everything has its own space. You have the question and answer structure as well as the different chords underneath it, which makes it, at least to me, sound really, really cool, really, really peaceful. For the bass, it's just a sine, just a wavetable, basic sine wave stuff, filtered with a filter envelope going on. Every time the MIDI note is hitting, the filter is just open up and just cutting down. And then we have the arpeggiator MIDI tool in front of it, which essentially, as you can see here, the notes are all the way dragged to until a note change happens, and this arpeggiator just plays eighth notes. And it's essentially just it's just kind of adds some rhythm to it. It's not even it doesn't even groove, it's all in the grid. But this doesn't really matter to me at this stage because I just felt like I need a bass here. I added some distortion to it. That's basically it. One way or one word about distortion. So, you all have distortion plugins if you have an DAW. And recently I heard a cool podcast by Kush Music, and he said something really, really interesting is because when you see all those mixing tutorials, all those old school LA big room, super expensive studio guys talking about how they mix stuff, they always choose the most analog, most exotic hardware equipment or emulations of that and talk how cool they sound. And back in the days when everything was kind of analog, all those hardware, all those analog gear had kind of a sound to it, and it's essentially distortion. So every time you add some analog gear, it adds some harmonic content to your signal. If you want to emulate that by your own and don't want to buy expensive, super crazy hardware stuff, just add a pinch of distortion to everything. Not crank everything up, but just a pinch. And everything gets a little warmer, a little more crisp. And in the end, if you sum everything together, you have just a really, really nice, full, warm sounding mix. And this is why I add a lot of distortion to a lot of tracks, but just a pinch. So this is for the bass. We have a break bass, which is just giving some low end in the introduction. This is basically just a Serum preset. You can get this one on Splice as well from the Embers Lo-Fi Soul Caps and Pro Audio pack. Super basic stuff, like a Reese bass. What you can do is you can just use two sawtooth waves, detune them, filter them, and then you have the same result, essentially. And the last part I want to talk about is these little plugs going on here, which are just sine waves again, with a lot of delay and a lot of reverb. And the lovely noise unison, which is, this is really good. This is like why I love Wavetable, because of the unison noise mode. Anyway, this is like, I had the first half of the melodics and felt like I need to differentiate in the second part. And the cool part about this is like a motive I use a lot. And I have this one from Avatar, The Last Airbender. And I use this one in my most kind of famous track. I wouldn't call it famous, but it's the most popular one, at least on my Spotify, Wipes. And it's essentially just the root note, one semitone down, then the seventh of the root note, and the third. If you play this continuously, you get like the really cool Avatar, The Last Airbender vibes, especially if you use some kalimba sound. And this is the exact same thing, but just with the D major scale and an octave above. And man, I use this pattern so much. The vinyl crackle, for obvious reasons, because we want to make this really lo-fi. And that's basically it for the composition of the melodics. So let's have a look on the drums. The drums were really, really simple, in my opinion. I always start with a blank drum rack and just drag and drop sounds into the drum rack I really like. And I just started using a kick and a snare from my new pack, Bedroom Beats and Lo-Fi Hip Hop Volume 3. This is a really cool pack. I'm really, really happy about it, and I love the drums, so I use them. Some lo-fi kick, filtered snare. Then I use the tambourine, hi-hat. So what I essentially started with was the kick pattern, and the kick is always on grid. So I never kind of swing the kick, at least not at this stage of my production. I never really swing it. But what I do though is when I draw in the snares, I kind of just select all and shift them slightly to the left. As you can see here, here's the grid, and the snares are just before the grid. And this gives it kind of a fast-paced feel. And I did the same stuff with the hi-hats. So the hi-hat on the one is always on grid, but the other three are always a little before the grid. So it kind of has a fast pace. Same with the 16th tambourine. And if you listen to this solo, it kind of has a groove. The snare, you kind of want your head to it. And the reason why I keep my kick on the grid is just to have like a solid groove foundation. So everything is shifting before the grid, but the kick, and because it's really loud, it's kind of setting the tone of the rhythm. So nothing fancy going on here. Really simple kick pattern, simple snare pattern, 8 hats, 16th tambourine, and that's basically it. And what I just added here were kind of little percussion loops. I love to play around with this. So we have some shifty, foley sounding loop, tambourine, some clocks, more hi-hats. Kind of like having a trap feel to it. Percussion loop from my pack, Bedroom Beats and Lo-Fi Hip Hop Volume 3. So, as you might see here, the numbers are all different, and this is because they are originally in a different tempo. And this is like a really important advice I want to give you here for drums. If you're using Ableton and if you are using drum loops, always make sure you warp your stuff at least in beats mode or repitch mode, because this way you keep your transients healthy. If you're using complex mode, which is really, really cool for melodic content because the pitch stays the same no matter how much you change the tempo, it kinda fucks around with your transients. And you don't want that. So you want beats mode, you want repitch mode, whatever. You can even get creative, like in this case. So the original drum loop was this. And if you change those little arrows here and you have it in transient, this means that every time a transient is playing and you reduce the number from 100 to whatever you want, it kind of reduces how much of after the transient is played. So if you have it to 100, it plays the full kind of length. If you have it to 20, it just plays 20%. And this way you can really tighten up loops and make some room. And yeah, this is like the percussive part. I have some clue compression going on here and some clipping just to make sure the transients are under control. Some little fill in from my pack again. And some crash transition. And this is basically it. So nothing too fancy. Together everything sounds like this. We have some delays going on here. I just copied some ad-libs and put it into some delay. Not even cut really tight. Shame on me. But that's basically it. So let's just have a quick look on the drum bus, the synth bus, and the vocal bus. For the drum bus, I like to use Fat Drum Studio, which is a preset by Ableton's hybrid reverb. Essentially, it's just a short reverb, which kind of puts everything into a room, makes it sound more warm. This is the drums without reverb. Kind of gives it room, lets it breathe in the mix. And then we have some standard clip. This is like a soft clipping device I talked about just for short, and percussion loops. Essentially, it just clips the transients and kind of reduces the peaks. If you see the transients here, and if I just put it off, you can see the kick is really peaking, and this way everything is really flat. And what you achieve with this, if you have flat transients, you can push them much louder because no peak is kind of distorting or cutting through everything. And you get a louder mix. And I really, beside that, I really like the crispy grittiness of soft clipping. With the synth bus, we have basically some sidechain compression going on. But I really like to talk about this sidechain compressor. So this is the Pro MB by FabFilter, but you can do this with many other multiband compressors. It's getting its sidechain, like the signal where it detects how much gain reduction is applied from the drum bus. And for the low band to 130 Hertz, which is basically just the bass. So this is just the bass. And it gets stuck by only the drum bus by the kick frequencies and really heavily compressed. So the kick is really punching through. And what I have for the rest of the melodics, like this part here, the mids and upper frequencies, I sidechained it to the snare. So whenever the snare is hitting, it gets ducked a little bit. This way you get a really cool, I want to call it organic sidechaining, because if you just sidechain everything to the kick will just smack through your whole mix, and sometimes you want that cool effect. I know some people who really like it, me included in some sense and some situations, but for this track I like to keep it more organic, have it more naturally playing, and the kick just getting rid of the bass frequencies just to make this clean. Now comes a cool trick, so watch closely, man, watch closely. We have the multiband dynamics from Ableton, which is sidechained by the lead vocal. And it's only sidechaining between 700 Hz and 3.6 kHz. So what this means, you have your complete melodics playing, and then your vocal is playing somewhere here. So this is the full range. Your vocals are playing somewhere here, and you just carve out this little space in the melodics for the vocal. And it's compressing like 4-5 dB, and really making some space, because you don't want your bass to be ducked by the vocal, you don't want everything else to be ducked. But if you just duck the area where like the foundation of the vocal sit, like the meat, the content of the vocal, not those brilliant highs, not those rumbling lows, but really just the information, you get a really clean, really nice sounding vocal sitting right in the middle of the melodics. So talking about the vocal is the second bus. I have some EQing going on, because when you extract acapellas from existing tracks, you get a lot of artifacts, a lot of stuff going on, and it's just the way I keep handling stuff, like with the EQ. I have some reverb going on here and some soothe again with another harshness detection. Then I have the bass kelf easy, what's called washout. And this is just like a reverb washing out effect, so whenever you activate it, everything gets kinda muffled into space. Really cool for transitions, because you want, in your music, you want to make your transitions smooth, or I like to have them smooth, so maybe you can do this as well with, like, we can dig into this here. This is like a grain delay, filter, reverb, EQing, and compression, another delay. So you just want to filter everything out and let it kind of disappear into delay and reverb. And that's basically it. We have, on the effects side, we have a little razor and some transition noise effects. And that's basically it. The whole track kind of wrote itself, because I wanted to start with some instrumental stuff. This little melody we talked about earlier. And then the vocal kind of set the arrangement. So you have like a verse, you have like a hook, you have a second verse, a bridge, whatever. The only thing I kind of changed was, because the vocal was, from the point it started, it was playing 1 minute 30 throughout, and I wanted to give it some space. And introduced just some instrumental only part. Anyway, this is it for the mixing. I use return channels a lot. It has nothing to do with CPU usage or whatever. It just comes down to easy handling, because I just have to crank up this little slider here, and I have instant reverb I like. So this is just personal preference. So let's have a look on the mastering. Because I have all my buses running at -6 dB into the master bus, just to make sure I have enough headroom when I produce music, I have the utility tool on here, which increases by 6 dB, which is just like kind of giving me more headroom back, so I don't have to crank the compressor all the way down. Anyway, here's the mastering chain. Yo, welcome back. Due to some technical problems, I needed to record the mastering again on a different day with different clothings and different lighting, I guess. So let's just watch this again, but only the mastering. So let's have a look. For the mastering, I have the telephone EQ, like the automation on the whole master. Just because, you know, in the back here is a DJ set by Pioneer. And I used to DJ a lot, and there's the thing where you just apply effects and filters to the masters. And I really like this. And I kinda use that for my advantage to filter stuff and to have it all come together in the mastering. Anyway, for the real mastering, I start with a utility tool which boosts by 6 dB, just because all my buses are going with -6 or -5 dB into the master, and I just want to push it a little bit so I don't have to increase the input gain for all the devices. I'm starting with Soothe. This is a preset called Balance to the Grammy Awards. It's kind of like my thing, because obviously you want the Grammy Awards, but beside that, it kind of reduces the lower mid-range area around 230 Hertz, which is the area I put all my stuff into, and it kind of gets cluttered all the time, so it just makes sense for me. As you can see, there's not much going on. It's just kind of soothing out the resonances. Next, we have the Shadow Hills compressor, doing a little bit of gain reduction. I like the sound of it. It's kind of costly and expensive, and you know, if I wouldn't have got it within the bundle, I wouldn't use it. And you don't need that stuff as well. Just grab a compressor just to glue everything together. Not much. That's maybe 1 to 2 dB gain reduction. Then we have the Menley EQ again. This is kind of expensive analog emulation stuff that sounds cool, but you don't need that really. It's just there. I just boosted the lows a little bit, cut down the mids again because I'm cluttering all my musical stuff there, and then boosting some air in the like 3 to 4K hertz just to make it more present and give it more of the feeling that it's more understandable, that it's closer to your ear. Next we have Ozone 9, one layer, and this is like the imager. There's this mixing engineer called Luca something, and I've heard in the tutorial once that he kinda forms or shapens his stereo image like a Christmas tree. So you start with a mono root, then you go with a stereo mid, and then go all the way down to mono again as you get higher. I mean, it works. Pretty mono low end. Wide mids. Still wide, but kind of more narrowed down in the top mid here. And the presence is really close again. I really like this. I used to kind of do it the opposite way and just build it like a ramp, so the higher it gets, the more stereo it gets, but I feel like you lose a lot of the crispy transients from the drums in the stereo field, and you maybe want them to have in the middle so people can actually nod their head to it and not just kind of guess where they are in the stereo field. Next is the vintage tape, just some tape emulation, give it a little drive, a little bit of distortion. And the last one is the vintage limiter, and I use this only to get a little bit of volume in the end. So as you can see, there's no actual gain reduction going on here, but I think it kinda, maybe it's just me, but it kinda colors the sound already if it's just on the signal. Next comes another Ozone, it's a maximizer, and I have no real idea. Maybe I was playing around with the standard clip. I have another limiter going on. This is the modern one, IRC4. Really love the maximizer here. True peak limiting is on. And in the end I have some soft clipping again, which does also a lot of work. So this master is probably kind of squashed if you want it, but it works. All the audio and mastering engineers around the world will see this and be like, ah! But do whatever the fuck you want. So anyway, this is for the mastering. I have the VPS scope at the end, which is really cool, but it has a scope, it has a spectrum, and a stereo. Really loud, really clippy mastering, but I felt it works pretty well for this track. So if you have any questions, if you want to know anything, if you think that I'm a jerk, and if you think that I should never produce any music, comment all this stuff below, and I'm happy to engage in the conversation with you about why I should never produce again. Or if you just like it, what you heard, then feel free to comment that as well. Like it, subscribe it, just be a nice human, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.